It's been announced that Maidstone Borough Council's Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee has ended the contract with Parkwood Theatres, who had been running the Hazlitt Theatre. During a cross-party meeting on Thursday, the 12th of November, the committee unanimously voted to reduce costs to the council. Here on Maidstone Radio this afternoon, we're joined by the chair of the Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee, Cllr Paul Harper, who'll tell us a little bit more about the decision and what it means for the Hazlitt. Hello, Paul. I guess the first question is, why has this decision been taken now?
Okay, the reason the decision was taken now is twofold. First of all, the council is under big financial pressures as a result of COVID, and we're projecting that we're going to be £5 million across Maidstone overspent. And next year, the finances don't look good either. So the council has to make some tough financial decisions. The other reason, and in a way is equally as pertinent for the Hazlitt, is that we have a contract with Parkwood to run the theatre on our behalf. And that requires them to be putting on a mix of community and professional shows and events in the Hazlitt Theatre. And due to COVID-19, they haven't been able to open the theatre since March. And all this time, we're paying them a monthly subsidy of £20,000 a month, and obviously not getting a service. And with the ongoing lockdown and pandemic, the rule of six and social distancing, it's unlikely in the foreseeable future that the Hazlitt will be able to reopen, and therefore the council has come to the decision that, painful though it is, that we need to terminate the contract with Parkwood. And
so a lot of that money, is it staffing costs?
The money we pay Parkwood is a subsidy towards the cost of running the venue. Theatres obviously are quite expensive. Their costs will tend to be a mixture of staffing, supplies, but also a large element of the theatre's costs will be in buying in the product, so the shows and the performers and so on. So our money will just be going towards ensuring that Parkwood can run the venue in a viable method.
So if we now just focus a little bit, I guess, on the staffing, because if you're employed at Hazlitt, you're going to be devastated by your announcement. Now, do you know what the plans are for those staff, and are any of them directly employed by the council?
Okay, so in terms of the Hazlitt, the council don't employ any staff at the Hazlitt. We have a leisure manager who is responsible not only for the Hazlitt Theatre, but is also responsible for Cobtree Manor Park and the estate, and Maidstone Leisure Centre. I mean, in terms, obviously, of impact to staff at Parkwood, I'd just also point out that at the same meeting, we decided to reduce the museum's budget by 25%, and that will largely end up being a reduction on our staff budget at the museum. So, it's not like we're just inflicting pain, unfortunately, on the staff at Parkwood. There will be pain felt by Maidstone Council employees and other services as we go through the cuts process.
Do you know if your decision will have prevented Parkwood potentially furloughing its staff?
Well, my understanding of the furlough process is it is possible, if you're about to make staff redundant, to continue to furlough them until the end of the period. But obviously, those will be decisions for Parkwood. As I say, from the council's perspective, we're effectively paying Parkwood £20,000 a month for a service they are unable to deliver. I mean, the service being to provide shows and events at the theatre, which hasn't had anything now since March. And on the hard economics, that's the rationale behind our decision.
So the concern, I think, at the beginning of this announcement was that the Hazlitt Theatre was going to be closed for good. However, I think what you're making clear is that this is a temporary measure and that you're going to open up the theatre once again, potentially, I guess, from early next summer when the COVID-19 stuff has all died down a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think the trouble is no one's really that clear on the timing, are they? I mean, I know they obviously seem to be a number of vaccines which may be on the way, but equally, I was listening to the radio yesterday, and they were implying that even with these vaccines potentially being rolled out, they probably wouldn't be completely rolled out until the end of 2021. And it seemed that the implication is that social distancing and the rule of 6 could well be in place for the whole of the next calendar year. So really at the moment, it's just impossible to say when we may be able to reopen it. But what my commitment is that I will work with our council officers. And as we go through 2021, we will be reviewing the situation, very frequently. And obviously, once we get at least halfway into the year and the national situation becomes clearer, then we'll start to hopefully get an idea when we'll be on the road towards looking to reopen the theatre. But at this stage, I just can't say.
When you do look to open up the Hazlitt Theatre, I guess let's just say next year, do you plan to run it yourselves, or will there be a tender process which could see sort of Parkwood taking over and running it once again?
Well, that's a big question. There's obviously so many unknowns in it. I mean, I think what we would need to do is when we get to the point at which we feel that the council can reinstate the theatre, we'd have to look at where we are then, really, because we don't know where the world will be, the economy generally, especially the arts and culture sectors. I mean, options obviously would be that the council may choose to run it directly itself, may choose to use an external operator such as Parkwood or others. It's just too early to say. I mean, all I will say is that I was a councillor in South London previously, and I was the chair of a theatre trust, a charity which used to run Wimbledon Theatre successfully, which was the country's 7th largest theatre. So there's various models we could look at, but those are decisions for the future.
Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but a petition has been started. In fact, I think there's a couple of petitions that have been started to save the theatre when it looked like, I guess, it was going to be closed. Now, when I had a look, it had over 5,000 signatures. Some of the comments were, if I read them out, say, Naomi said, "This place is more than a theatre, it's a community hub." Donna, "My daughter loves attending the Hazlitt Youth Theatre. She's looking forward to a career in theatre and this will devastate her." Jill said, "I spent most of my childhood performing there. Its loss will be a disaster for the town." Susan, "A county town needs a theatre." And John, "My grandchildren performed on stage and it's given them a lifetime enjoyment of the theatre." A lot of people getting very emotional about what's happening to the Hazlitt.
Yeah, I've also received, as you can imagine, a number of those people. They've sent me emails which I'm responding to. I think there was some, as you say, there was definitely concern, I think, the end of last week that the council was going to close the theatre permanently. And that's never been a consideration of myself or the committee. When we looked at this last week, we always wanted to be ready to reverse the decision and to reopen when the time is appropriate. What we are going to do is we will, once we've got the contract termination sorted out, be willing to talk to local groups. And as the social distancing and rule of 6 is relaxed during the remainder of the pandemic, then we may be able to look, as I say, with local groups as to perhaps help identify alternative spaces they can practice in or perform in whilst the theatre remains closed. But if you like, that's probably for the other side of Christmas, I'd imagine.
Councillor Paul Harper, Chair of the Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee, thank you very much for joining us here on Maidstone Radio this afternoon.